Alright guys, welcome back to the Benison Watch channel. Thanks for sharing, and subscribing if you've been tuning in, and if you've been a customer of service before, we really appreciate you. And today we're going to talk about how to set, manage, and actually navigate chronograph features on luxury timepieces. Now this is something that may seem self-explanatory to some of you, but I guarantee you will learn something new, as different brands have different engaging features of the chronograph function. And one of the biggest and most common issues we see when it comes to service work on luxury timepieces is folks think that the watch is broken, or perhaps it's not working correctly, or that there's something that they did wrong, when really they just weren't taking care of and engaging the chronograph function of a timepiece correctly. So we have a few different brands here that I'm going to show you, and there's also a couple of different indicators and tips we're going to show you throughout this video of how to manage these chronograph features on your watch so that it maintains proper timekeeping and that you don't break anything on the mechanism. We're going to start with this beautiful vintage classic Omega Speedmaster, and this is a gorgeous two-tone piece. It has the steel casing with the gold plating and accents on the subdials. These are the subdials right here, and these subdials are going to tell you different timekeeping periods for the amount of time tracking on this chronograph feature, which I'll show you. So when you're looking at the subdials, you want to make sure you're paying attention, because a lot of times what will happen is people will think this 12 indicator hand here, this thin long hand, is the second sweeper on a chronograph watch, when really it isn't. So the watch is not broken when in fact it's working. You can tell here on the right subdial that the seconds is actually running. So make sure you're paying attention to that. This is a vintage manual wind watch, so you're going to want to make sure you actually wind the watch with a clockwise turn up to 40 turns to fully get power reserve in the mainspring. If you do that, you shouldn't have any issues. Now, a lot of people will think that this is like an automatic piece, like the newer ones, where the rotor will sit on your wrist and wind over time. Not necessarily true on the vintage pieces, right? So you want to make sure that's wound before you actually engage the chronograph mechanism, otherwise it's not going to run. So the chronograph is not broken, it just doesn't have the power to engage from the start to finish. The chronograph pushers are actuated on this side of the piece. This is the most common arrangement for chronographs. It's not always the setup for this, but for most pieces you will have the chronograph pushers will be right here. So you want to start and stop this with the top pusher. And you want to let the chronograph run for at least 15 seconds. The reason is sometimes you'll see this chronograph start and it'll stop before the 15-second marker if there's something that needs service or is wrong with the piece. So if it's going past 15 seconds, that's a good indication. You're going to stop the chronograph with this second push of the top of the piece, and then you can reset with the bottom pusher. And I like to give that a nice firm press so that it resets to 12. Now this is great because it's actually going back and resetting exactly at the 12 mark. If it's not setting to the 12 mark and it's off on that indicator, it usually means the watch needs to be serviced or it needs to be adjusted. It's just a adjustment of the actual internal setting standard, or where the baseline is for that chronograph. So don't panic. It's something that could potentially be easily resolved. But that's how you engage a simple chronograph. Do not push this restart pusher while the chronograph is actuating, or you could damage the mechanism. The only pieces that that's okay on are flyback chronographs, which we'll bring in another video with some of the Panerais and Audemars Piguets, and or the split-second chronographs, which are more high complications. On this Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore 44mm in ceramic, which is a really cool piece, you can see from the see-through case back, this is an automatic winding rotor, and it's also able to be adjusted manually. So I will unscrew the crown to test the winding and just wind it a few turns, and then I will set the watch back to position 0 by putting the crown screwed against the case flush. Engaging the chronograph, having the crown against the case in position 0 is important, just because it will help you regulate how the watch is engaged. You don't have bigger risk of damaging the watch, and then you can engage the same chronograph mechanism by topping the top pusher. So just like we showed you before, you see the chronograph hand emerging. You're going to let it run, and then if you let it run long enough, you will see the subdials tracking that time period over extended periods. It's okay to let this chronograph feature run. It's going to take more mainspring power off the watch, so that's something to pay attention to. I don't usually like to leave this running too long. When I'm done with it, I usually just press stop, and I can either leave it at that position if I'm recording information, but if I'm not, it's not a big deal. I just reset it with the bottom pusher. And you notice I'm not just flippantly pushing this. I'm hard pressing it to reset it and then letting go, just to make sure, right? So there you go. Beautiful. Resets to 12, just like we said. Now this one's the fun one. So with these Daytonas, this is a Rolex Daytona. This is the new ceramic bezel. And with these Daytonas and other pieces like Breitling Chronomat 44s, a lot of times I'll have customers call and they'll say, this watch is not working. I don't understand how to engage the chronograph. And it's because the chronograph has a locking mechanism so that you don't accidentally push that piece of the complication while you're doing other things. So the Daytona was made to track racing times and lap times, and it has these locking systems, this locking mechanism on the top and bottom pusher that need to be unscrewed counterclockwise, like so, in order to engage the mechanism, right? So if we can get your little fingers in there and have some dexterity, you'll notice that if you press the pusher now, it's working. Beautiful, right? So you can start and stop just like most watches, and then when you're done, you can lock this by screwing clockwise. And there you go. But notice when you go to push the mechanism now, nothing's moving. It's a locking system. So keep this in mind when you're engaging your chronograph, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure that the actual complication is wound, and make sure when you're shipping your watches or your timepieces that you are not letting the chronograph move in shipment. I would reset it to the 12 o'clock position. If you leave it going, it could either damage the watch, and or if someone goes to purchase this from you, what will end up happening is they'll think that it's broken, or they'll try to reset it and they didn't wind it, and then you'll have more complications because you left the actual movement running while being shipped and shaking around, which isn't a good idea. All right, so we're going to show you another video with some panorise and flyback movements that will show you how to reset this while it's moving. You don't have to start and stop it. Stay tuned, like, share, subscribe. We got a bunch of more content coming for you that'll help you in your journey of collecting, trading, investing, and all that good stuff. All right, thank you so much. Stay tuned.